Here, Dr. Lester Spence, Professor of Political Science and Africana Studies at Hopkins University. His latest book, Knocking the Hustle Against the Neoliberal Turn of Black Politics. Good to have you in the studio. Good to see you once again.
Yeah, good to be here.
You can jump in with your thoughts.
So one of the things that I don't think we paid much or enough attention to are the various ballot initiatives, right? So we can think about the Democratic Party and the degree to which they're representing people's interests or black people's interests or poor folks' interests. And that's important to talk about, whether we talk about that in general or within that neoliberal term period, or whether we talk about it in relationship to how many seats they should have won, right? But what we need to be focusing on, both in the short term and the long term, are these various ballot initiatives for two reasons. One is because we know that ballot initiatives draw people to the polls, right? And particularly during off-year elections, when we actually need people to come to the polls more than normal, having the right ballot initiatives on the proposal, on the ballot is a good look, right? Secondarily, it actually increases people's capacity to govern, right? And it actually increases our ability to actually have a functioning democracy. So if you look at Michigan, where Michigan just passed a ballot initiative that actually allows for, I'm sorry, I have stuff in my ear. That allows for.
Yeah, there you go.
So when you actually have something in the ballot that actually reduces gerrymandering, and gerrymandering has been killing the ability of the Democratic Party to function, of people to actually get their needs met. If you think about Michigan, where they actually just passed legislation, it looks like they're going to pass legislation to allow for marijuana. Now, to be for real, it's not like that's really my thing. But that actually extends the ability of people to actually live lives without having to worry about the law coming after them. If you think about that Florida ballot initiative, where for the first time, if the number is, I saw the number, I don't think it's right, but it's crazy if it is, like 40% of black men in Florida are not going to have the ability to vote. Right?
Why?
So as we're thinking about
what happened to them?
The felon disenfranchisement. 1.4 million people in the state of Florida.
So real quick, because I've been waiting.
I know, but I want to get, because before Thomas has to leave, I want to get over the.
No, that's okay. Keep going.
Yeah, so if you think about that, so the Democratic Party is responsive. So, Paul, you're right. The Democratic Party has got is significantly constrained by capital, by a certain type of capital. But at the bottom line is, at some point in time, they're going to have to actually get votes. And the more we expand democracy, the more they're going to have to respond to that.
They don't like democracy.
No, hell no.
No. I think what you just said was really critically important. And before we turn to Danny Glover, who's going to be joining us in a couple of minutes here, I know Thomas Frank has to leave soon. I wanted to get you back in here.
I have to go in about 15 minutes.
So I wanted to let you jump back in, especially respond to what Lester just said, because I think there's a complex question here about all that we really should delve into together, because it has to do with the future of where our politics are going.
What you just described one way of, forgive me for a second here. I grew up in Kansas. We had this chapter in Kansas history called populism. They had it in a lot of southern states too, where left-wingers took over the state government. Yeah, that's right. And one of the things they believed in is what you just described, initiative and referendum. And what you also described, the mass disenfranchisement of people, and there's all sorts of different ways that they have of doing this now. It's not blatant and in your face like it was in the 1890s and 1900s. It's a little slightly more settled. It's voter ID laws. It's all of these different things. That's anti-populism. And I've been researching populism. I'm supposed to be writing a book about it. But I came up here today, so I would be at home typing on the book.
Are we supposed to feel guilty now?
Here's the thing. Here's the deal. Democrats don't like populism anymore. They look at Trump and they're like, that's populist. We don't want anything to do with that. We want to stay away from that. They have this distorted idea of what populism is, and they think it's this awful man and these awful politicians in Europe like Marine Le Pen and these other people, and it has poisoned the word and the idea for them. And they can't look back into their own tradition now and see, this is what we used to be, folks. You know, and I'm sorry, I should say we, I'm not much of a Democrat. I mean, I am one, right? I vote for the Democrats and everything, but they were the party of the vast, they didn't need the corporate money because they had the people. So they were the party of the people.
If I could just interject something quickly about Florida, which I think is very interesting, the Amendment 4, which did restore the voting rights. By the way, 63%, which means 15% of DeSantis voters must have done it. For sure, only about a 70,000 vote thing here. But also that this is a campaign that was led by people who were former prisoners. And that is one of the most interesting trends in politics over the past 2 years. We saw Larry Krasner really got over the hump because incarcerated people from Philadelphia and their families. We saw certainly in Alabama, this was a big issue in the Doug Jones case. And by the way, Kenny Glasgow of the Ordinary People's Society, who registered probably thousands of voters in jails, then subsequently just a couple months later framed up on a murder charge that he's facing right now, which gives you a sense of how potent it is. But you also see it non-electorally with things like the National Prison Strike. I think this is one of the most interesting trends that we're seeing right now in politics.
Ordinary People's Society?
They call themselves the Ordinary People's Society in Alabama. It's a great community group.
Name.
They register thousands of people. They work with returning citizens. They do so much great work. No surprise why their leader is being targeted in a state like Alabama. It's a wild story for people to look into it. But I think it's very interesting to see that where we're going in the conversation around mass incarceration, especially, that it's not just sort of prisoners as objects of the discussion, but inside of prisons organizing their friends and their family on the outside to make a huge political difference.
I have to interject something here. I was just in Australia, and I was meeting with all these Labour Party politicians, and one of them was telling me this anecdote. And he's like, "Well, I was canvassing in a prison one time," and I'm like, "What?"
Well, yeah, right, because they have the vote.
Can vote. Right. They have to go campaign in prisons.
Yes. And this is the kind of grassroots action that happens on the state level, on the local level, inside the Democratic Party, people who are having to do this because, of course, they don't want to run as Republicans, and in a lot of places they can't get any traction as a third-party candidate, so they have to run as a Democrat. So they do this kind of grassroots local organizing inside the Democratic Party, and they win. And then the National Democratic Party ignores them. And that's why that's one of the reasons why there's no blue wave. It's just a trickle. It was just a trickle because the National Democratic Party actually ignores the will of the people on the ground at the local level in the states.
So let me just come in here. We just had Ralph Nader, who is the founder of the Center for the Study of Responsive Law,